All right, the hour of 6:30 having arrived, I'd like to call the regular Plan Commission meeting for the City of Columbus to order. Matt, will you take the roll call?
Sure. Traxler?
Here.
Motif?
Present.
Arnold?
Here.
Bastion?
Here.
Monday?
Here.
And Myers.
Here.
Thailand is excused, so we do have a quorum.
Great, thanks. All right, I'd like to note that this is an open meeting and has been properly posted under state law. Item number 4 on your agenda is to approve the agenda. Please take a moment to review, and then I'll entertain a motion to approve or amend the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented. I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This is our agenda for the evening. All right. Item 5, approve the minutes from the October 14th Plan Commission meeting. The minutes are presented in your packets on the second page. Again, take a moment to review, and then I'll entertain a motion to approve or amend. Anybody wish to approve or amend, or move to approve or amend?
I'll move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you.
Motive will second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from last meeting as written. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye. Opposed? Minutes are approved. All right, we'll move to item 6, citizen comments. This is the time for general comments from any citizens present. There are none present in the room. Do we have any present on Zoom?
It looks like the members on Zoom are either applicants or members of the Plan Commission, so.
Did you receive any to read into the
I
record?
have not, no.
All right. None present, none received prior. So that closes item 6. Item 7, unfinished business. None's on the
No.
agenda. None known. All right. Item 8, we'll move on to new business. 8A is a public hearing regarding the request of ACS RBHS LLC for a proposed zoning text amendment to 114-14 of the Columbus Zoning Code to allow multifamily development to have more than one principal structure on a lot of record. I'll open the public hearing. Matt?
No, actually, to make things a little more clear, we've gotten in the habit of having a motion and a second to actually open the
That's
public
right.
hearing.
Thank you for the reminder.
Yep, no problem.
I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
I'll move. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
No problem.
All right.
Now, will you please present
Yes,
the item?
I will give an overview. We do have the applicant present, and I'll let him kind of jump in once I kind of done with my overview here. So essentially, the applicant, as most of you on the Plan Commission, some of the new members may not recall, but they went through a rezoning application for lot 6 and 7 out in the Commerce Center to zone it from I-1 to R4, kind of late in the process, and we're starting to review their plans moving forward. There was this 11414, and it's one of the items in our zoning code that has been there that I don't know how closely it's been enforced over the years, but essentially what it says is no more than one principal building shall be located, erected, or moved onto any single lot of record that is utilized or zoned for residential purposes in the city of Columbus, except as permitted through a PUD. And then the second sentence gets into, at the sole discretion of Plan Commission, permission may be granted for more than one principal structure for basically commercial properties. So the applicant has elected to apply for a zoning text amendment. And this is one where, since I have been at the city, we've not had any of these applications come through, so this is even new ground for me. Essentially, what they're requesting is to have the multifamily development also be kind of exempted, or at least have the give the discretion to the plan commission to review and then grant some sort of exemption for a multifamily development as well. I have talked with the city attorney, and the one thing that he has also recommended is that an ordinance should be completed to update 114-160 and 114-73 in collaboration with this, to basically clarify that this section of the code could impact those sections as well. So 114-60 is specifically relates to R4 multifamily. And then 114-73 is the use table, and he thought we could update both of those areas, and I agree. So with that, staff is supporting this proposed amendment. The one thing I would note is the second page in the application. I do put what the applicant has requested. As far as their proposed edits, I guess mine was simply the second page basically stating, instead of putting it under the exemption under the first sentence where they're talking about as a PUD, or if it's zoned R4, it would be saying something to the effect that at the sole discretion of Plan Commission, permission may be granted for the location of more than one principal building on lots zoned for commercial, industrial, and multifamily purposes. So that basically that would be I1, I2, B2, B3, and then also the R4 zoning designation. So it's basically commercial and industrial uses. So essentially, I guess that's the application in a nutshell. I'll let Jim Hartung or Steve Black step in and add any details that I may have missed. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think Manny adequately described what we're trying to accomplish here. It's again, it's a rather interesting provision in the code. It seems to be kind of contrary to what a multifamily development is, which is a multi-building, in most cases, a project. And it just makes sense to have it all be on one lot as opposed to a number of different lots, because it makes it much more difficult to then adhere to all the various setbacks and impervious versus impervious areas, etc. So it seemed to make more sense to go this route, which is why we submitted what we submitted.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yeah.
Wait, lot 6 and 7 now one lot?
No.
Okay, so there's 2 lots of
Correct.
multiple buildings.
Correct. So essentially what would happen is, so it's lot 6, I believe in the packet they have a conceptual layout of what this would look like.
Yep, I saw
This
it.
would still have to go through staff level review and approvals. So you see on lot 7 where they show, let's see here, I believe 3 buildings, actually 4 buildings, and then lot 6, let's see, 5, with the 5th building, depending on what happens with their wetland delineation that they'll have to go through. So essentially what the approval is for is so that they can allow to have 5 principal structures. The alternatives would be, go through the PUD process, do some sort of land division to create 5 lots for each building.
Understood.
Or the other alternative, I guess those are the two alternatives, including to what's being proposed. But, so essentially, what this zoning text amendment will do is it will allow them to build more than one principal structure. So they can have, 4, or in one case, 5 apartment buildings on one lot.
And that's all that we're discussing for 2
Correct.
lots,
We're
multiple
call- we're-
buildings, or anything in the future is also,
Correct. This doesn't approve their apartments. They would have to come back and they'd have to submit the plans that are required, and they've been told what plans that would be needed. It'd be under 7815. It'd be site plans, grading plans and whatnot, and they'd have to be reviewed by city staff and approved by city staff before any sort of building permit could be issued.
right, but my question is, we're changing the zoning ordinance, so that if I buy a lot over in,
This would be the same for you.
Okay.
If you were
Okay.
doing multifamily development in another part of town, this would apply equally to you as it does to them, yes.
okay. And I guess it's assumed then all other requirements are also met, number of
Yes, this
parking
does not exempt
spots?
them, this doesn't exempt them from other parts of the zoning code, it just,
Okay.
at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other commissioners, do you have any questions for either the applicant or Mr. Schreiber?
I do, I have a question, and, please forgive me if this sounds kind of ignorant, but this is just not my area of expertise. Can you tell me what was sort of the rationale or the reasoning behind the ordinance in the first place?
My interpretation was that maybe the past council felt that having apartments go through the PUD process was preferred rather than having a traditional PUD, I'm sorry, I spoke an acronym, planned unit development. So planned unit development is site-specific zoning. So it would be a zoning district just for the 2 parcels out here. And at one point in time, council must have felt that was the preferred mechanism to approve multifamily development.
And do you see any downside to changing the ordinance as is being requested tonight?
You always worry when you're changing, the laws that there could be unintended consequences behind making changes. But however, I can't identify any sort of unforeseen, unintended consequence due to this change. The one thing, if this was maintained and we required multiple PUDs over time, that does become a lot for staff to make sure it's managed correctly, because then technically you start having, instead of having your 10 districts that we have, or 15 districts, I don't know it off the top of my head, I probably should. You end up having many more, because then you have site-specific zoning. So then it's a lot more to manage. And then when there's something that, let's say, needs to be addressed with the zoning code, you basically have to go through this whole process to amend the PUD rather than going through like a variance type procedure. So I think to the maximum extent practical, I think PUD has its place for specific projects, but I do think it's better to try to get the zoning code to meet most of developmental needs throughout the city.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other commissioners, any questions?
Andy has traffic. Yep.
I just was curious, instead of changing the law, can you change might give a conditional use in zoning?
Not for this case, no. It does not require conditional use. Really, the only way around it was request a variance, which it didn't really seem like there was a hardship in this case, and staff didn't think a variance was really warranted. It seemed the zoning text amendment seemed the most likely route out of the options that were kind of presented to the developer or the applicant.
Okay.
Matt?
Yep. Sarah, please go.
So in listening to the discussions here, I am not really comfortable with just changing the text. I understand that that's giving the developers a ease through this, but I'm not getting enough justification for the future and what the ramifications are if we make this change in the future. It might be more advantageous to do a planned urban development.
Okay.
Anybody else? I've got a few things, but I'll let you all go first. All right. So when this packet was first delivered early in the week, I had the same concerns. Like, what about this particular proposal makes the PUD process unsuitable, right? Or the layout proposal. So what I'm hearing tonight from your end, Matt, is that it could go through the PUD process, but perhaps we've run into similar developments in the city that have gone through the PUD process or had to go through the PUD process. And correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of them kind of have the same flavor. In other words, we're not getting a lot out of the PUD process when it comes to a multifamily development that couldn't be handled in what I've marked down here as called a sort of a PUD light, right? Is that fair to say that a lot of multifamily developments are similar in nature? They could go through the PUD process, but this particular zoning amendment might streamline some of those cases. Is that accurate?
Would streamline it? No, I don't think it would necessarily streamline it. I guess I don't know what you mean by that. I mean, I think it would.
What I mean is kind of like the last question that got raised. Like, why should we be comfortable with this when the PUD process would also accommodate this?
It does make it. It does make it. How do I put this? I wouldn't say it streamlines it, but it does quicken the process. I think it probably, the expectations from the city's point of view is probably more clear cut than what it is with the planned unit development. Planned unit development is really proposed zoning from the developer on what they want to see. It's site specific, and they basically draw their site plans and then try to figure out their zoning code based on exactly what they think they're going to build. And in some cases, I've seen PUD where it's basically, here's what we're building. This is, this is essentially what the zoning should be, or what the PUD's requirements should be. So I do think I guess it does make it streamlined in that aspect, if that makes any sense. I feel like it's
Close enough. Jim, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I did want to chime in. I don't think it streamlines it at all. Basically, it's almost adding another step. So with the PUD process, that is a pretty extensive package that needs to be put together to be approved, and Matt can chime in on, all the different requirements that is needed in a PUD. Mm-hmm. All we're asking for here is really just more of a logical step to be added. The zoning is already in place, which allows for multifamily zoning. The only thing that we're looking for is, okay, we want to do apartments here. I think everyone knows that. It's just, is the plan commission council okay with the fact that we're going to have more than one building on a particular lot? So that, I mean, if the plan commission right off the bat says no, well, then that allows us to really try to take a look at a different angle. You know, again, we probably wouldn't go a PUD route because obviously the plan commission does not want to see more than one building on a particular lot. So in a PUD, the same thing would hold true, is that there would be multiple buildings within the same lot. So this is really just adding a logical step, which is, yep, we already have the R4 zoning, which allows for multifamily. It's just, are we okay with having more than one building on a particular lot? Like, for instance, the mini warehousing that was just approved, the expansion, a few plan commissions, councils ago, there was actually a requirement by the city to combine lots so that all of those buildings are on the same lot. So again, it just makes logical sense that yes, this isn't mini warehousing and that type of zoning, this is a residential zoning, but there's going to be one owner that owns all of the buildings. It just makes sense to have it on one lot.
Okay. So I am going to go through this and kind of look for holes and soft spots and those unintended consequences, right? I think that's what I feel we need to do here. Matt, question for you. Does the term multifamily include duplexes? Or is that defined separately in the zoning ordinance?
Let me look up what the definition is of multi. I probably should use a definition from the zoning code, so you're right, it probably should be, it could be a different word. Let me.
Right,
look
yeah,
at our
will you
code.
look into that?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out is, does this then allow multiple duplexes in, say, a proposed condo development, right? Let's see.
You have to be on a condo plat, so that's a little bit different.
Well, but that's still often the same lot, right? The condo documents define which parts are common use and which are, whatever the other terms are, individual use, et cetera.
Right.
But often they're on the same legally recorded lot, right? So, let's see, all these other questions are kind of for you too, Matt, so sorry.
That's fine.
Does the site plan portion of the zoning code, is that chapter 74 that you referenced?
78.
78, all right.
Yep.
So does that portion of the zoning code address things like distances between principal structures?
That would revert to requirements under the zoning code and what's under 11460 for R4. So all those requirements would be under the district requirements. Okay. So those would be laid out under that section.
So those are those domino pieces. Correct. That the city attorney was talking about would also have to get put into place.
So when we get the site plan, I would be looking at the code and how what they've applied for meets our code. And honestly, they'll probably need to come back for some sort of parking exemption too, because our code doesn't distinguish between multifamily and single family when it comes to parking. And it's something that's going to be updated because it requires 2 garage stalls and 1 off-street stall for every house. And it's like, well, wait a minute, multifamily and single family are different types of properties. So that's something that's already kind of on my, but that's something that I think, has been addressed with other projects relatively easily.
Well, like, what I'm concerned with is that, approving this, is there a mechanism in place that allows you to do
a multifamily dwelling is a building or a portion thereof designed for occupancy by 3 or more occupants, families.
Okay, so duplexes are defined differently.
Duplexes are defined differently by our code.
And this ordinance amendment would not then
Correct.
allow for multiple duplexes on a lot. Okay, great. I see the text amendment includes industrial and commercial. Those sections already include provisions for having multiple principal structures?
Correct. I think that's just trying to clarify when you look at the way it's currently written, it just says, at the sole discretion of the Plan Commission, permission may be granted for the location for more than one principal building on lots not zoned or utilized for residential purposes. I guess there might be a tax exempt property or exempt properties that may be impacted by this, but for most part, I can't think of like whether it's schools or churches that have more than one principal structure on a lot. So maybe we should just leave it as my interpretation when I read this was that provision was more intended for commercial development, and that's why I made the change or recommended the change that was in there.
Okay, but that's already an allowed thing.
Correct. We already allow non-residential to have more than one principal structure with the permission from the Plan Commission.
Okay. So really, we're just sliding multifamily into a similar category.
Correct. And we're clarifying what we mean by non-residential.
Okay. What does the process look like if a proposal for multiple buildings comes to Plan Commission denies it? They could, what are the
Board of Zoning
applicants'
Appeals
choices?
is the review entity for anything that has been denied by Plan Commission.
So they
You
could
can
either appeal,
They can appeal, correct.
they could choose to go a PUD route, but like Jim said, if the Plan Commission's already tipped its hand to say, we don't want multiple buildings on here, then that's probably a no-go. They could rearrange their site so that it could be divided into single, right, lots
Correct.
housing a single building. Okay. All right. I don't know if this is a question for you, Matt, or for other commissioners to consider, but is there a danger in setting precedent or expectation from the Plan Commission when people come and request multiple buildings and those get approved, but somebody else comes and does not get approved?
Absolutely.
So,
I mean,
What's the
when,
downside of that?
what's,
Downside.
go ahead.
I see the downside as not being able to make accurate and logical decisions given the different projects. While I understand that it may be the most efficient route for Mr. Hartung, it opens up the door for impacts that we don't yet know on other projects.
Can you give me a scenario that's in your mind?
It's in my mind. I don't know if it's accurate. I'm going to say this is my first meeting, so bear with me, guys. I'm not the expert here. But let's just say we change the wording in the ordinance and another developer comes along, which, Columbus can only hope we get more development. But they come along and their plan is not as well put together and it's not going to adhere to the code. And they're going to want an exemption. I mean, at what point does that stop?
Well, the city would stop that.
they still have to meet codes. Putting this in there does not exempt them from meeting codes. It just exempts them from having one principal structure on one lot. Or gives them the opportunity to get that.
You said it wrong. I mean ordinances, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you change an ordinance for every project. and we're not looking at the full economic impact or environmental impact and understanding what those issues are. I haven't heard any sound reasons to uphold the change.
So the other option is they're just going to build it on most of the lots and ask for setbacks to be smaller, and they're gonna build it anyway. So if the goal is, if the goal is to stop the project, I don't think anybody's got that kind of moxie to do that.
I don't think anybody's intent on stopping the project. In fact, the council approved it to go through. That's not what this is about. This is about making sure that we're making logical decisions regarding changes in ordinances.
I haven't heard a logical argument either way, to be honest with you.
Sarah, is it fair to say that your feelings can be summed up by saying, like, the PUD process seems like the appropriate amount of hands-on, and this proposed ordinance does not?
For me, at this point, yes. But I would also like to say, being new to the commission, I wouldn't mind having a workshop to learn more about this stuff.
Hey, Matt, this is Brad. I have a question.
Yep. Go.
So can you explain the difference? My concern is, say, distances between buildings, or as Andy mentioned, the setbacks. Does this take away some of that control where the distance between buildings now has no restrictions? Because obviously with a single lot in a single building, there's setbacks that are in place. And we have the ability to deny those if someone wants to put buildings too close together.
Mm-hmm.
So if we allow, say across the street, we've got 100 acres and somebody says, well, I just want to put a bunch of buildings on here and I want to stuff them all really close together, is there any control over how close these buildings are versus if they were on single lots?
So, yeah, in our codes, there's distances between a detached accessory structure and other principal structures, so they would have to meet those requirements. I know between a detached accessory and a primary structure, it's 10 feet. I can look in the code real quick if you need the distance between two primary or principal structures. I know our code identifies that. So there are setbacks already in place that says, structures have to be so far apart from each other. A lot of that in zoning codes is due to fire protection type issues, obviously, making sure if one structure's on fire that it doesn't spread to the next. So.
Can I ask Mr. Hartog a question?
Sure.
Jim, when we were at council and talking, we had talked about green space and a play area potentially for kids. I don't see where you would fit that in these lots. Can you point that out for me, please?
We have to have a certain amount per code of pervious surface, basically green space area.
Yeah.
It's 40%, right, Matt?
No, it's 60. Well, no, yeah, it's 40%. You could have 40% for coverage for buildings, 20% for other, like your parking areas, and then 40% green.
So where would that 40% be? I'm sorry.
Well, right now they only have conceptual plans. They don't have final plans drawn yet. So,
Yeah, so for our lot 7, it's basically along Transit and Commerce. That whole area there is green space.
Okay.
And I want to not get bogged down on these particular site plans. We're talking about the amendment to the ordinance allowing for site plans such as these. So I don't want to get too bogged down in the details. Not to say that those aren't important, but.
That is true. I mean,
But it's true, right? I mean, this discussion is really about, do we allow, not that do we allow, I mean, I think we're all agreed that we would allow this, but how do you state it, how do you change something to allow this to happen, right? Do you change the ordinance, or do you do a conditional use? How do you accept this or allow this to happen? Right?
Yeah, it feels like the question is the PUD process an appropriate thing for the city to keep in place and not have an alternative route, or this being an alternative route so that developments like these can, I'll use the word avoid, and that's not necessarily in a dodging sense, but, have them be able to take a different route to approval. So,
Yeah, my opening question was exactly that, right? Nothing else changes, it's just, do you allow this to happen? The multiple buildings in these type of lots.
Commissioners, any other questions? We're still in the public hearing stage here. We'll have a chance to discuss again after the public hearing is closed, but anything else that comes to mind?
I guess I just want to make sure that people aren't, overlooking the fact that, we're not asking for any type of approval on anything. It's just really, we're looking for the process to be changed a little bit such that, Plan Commission still has the right to approve or not approve, but in speaking for us as a developer and developers in the future is, when we're looking at projects, you kind of need to fundamentally know what the project's going to look like before you start spending, tens of thousands of dollars on design to, potentially then get it denied or modified, which, that's real dollars. This is just adding a step to getting what I think is a fairly benign fundamental question answered first is, okay, the zoning allows for multifamily units. Is the Plan Commission and Council okay with having multiple units on one lot? If so, that's great. It doesn't give any approvals whatsoever. We still have to go through the process. But it gives us direction that, okay, they're okay with that route. We can design our project accordingly.
Matt, I have a question on the intent of some of this language. The language in this proposed ordinance reads, at the sole discretion of the Plan Commission, permission may be granted for the location of more than one principal building. So does this mean that when a proposal would get brought to Plan Commission, the Plan Commission would actually be approving the particular locations of the buildings, or is it simply permission to have X number of buildings on this lot? Right, it says for the location of. I'm trying to understand exactly what that means.
In my interpretation, because this was a language that was in our existing code, it is, you're approving what they're going to build. You are approving their site plan that they are intending to build. So it's not, you're not approving a conceptual plan, you are approving final plans. And we've had this discussion numerous times where when Plan Commission is reviewing something, they should be reviewing what the developer intends to build. They should have their items, all sort of contingencies figured out, whether it's wetlands, whether it's, whatever, and they should know what they're going to be building when they present it to us. So the location, it's kind of like a conditional use permit, right? Conditional use permits, we define, what a minor and major, change is. This is kind of the same thing. It's like, if they're moving a foot, maybe that's not a big deal, but if they say they're going to build, 10 8-unit buildings and end up building 6 12-unit buildings, it's like, well, wait a minute, why is Planning Commission approving this? I think it should be the intent of what they're actually going to build.
So the intent is to bring a site plan for site plan approval containing more than one principal use on the lot.
Yes.
Okay, I think that language, personally, I think that language would need to be much clearer. Okay.
I'll just say, I'm fine with making the change to the ordinance. I haven't heard the downfall that is going to be detrimental to the city.
Any other last comments? We can wrap up the public hearing part of it and then continuing our discussion with
Sounds good.
Commission.
I'll make a motion to close, do we make a motion to close the hearing, or do you have?
I got to do a bunch of asking and then we can move, so. All right, are there any members of the public that wish to make comment at this public hearing? I'll ask again, are there any members of the public that wish to make comment at this public hearing? Third and final ask, are there any members of the public that are present that wish to make comment at this public hearing? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Melissa, second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by aye.
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 Opposed? All right, public hearing is closed. We'll move on to item 8B, which is consideration and possible action on the request of ACS RBHS LLC for proposed zoning text amendment to 114-14 of the Columbus zoning code to allow multifamily development to have more than one principal structure on a lot of record. So this is the time for commission to discuss amongst themselves. Anybody want to start?
I mean, I already started, I said that I don't see a problem with the change to the ordinance. I think, at the end of the day, this is one of those deals where this is going to happen one way or the other, and no one has presented an argument that it doesn't make sense to allow a multifamily development to have one principal structure on the lot. I think our ordinance was probably maybe not right to begin with. Our ordinances are made by councils every year, and they're changed every other meeting. These are very simple things. So I agree with Mr. Hartung.
Other comments?
And I would agree with
I think there's enough checks and balances after the
fact, if there's something going on, getting the permits, all of that stuff can be denied at that point if, for some reason, some of the codes aren't being met.
Anybody else have other thoughts? I'm supportive of this idea. I don't know that the language is sufficient quite yet in and of itself. I'd like some clarity on how 114-60 and 114-73 are going to change. In other words, I'd prefer seeing all of them at the same time. Because, right, 114-60 and 73 would have to come to us at some future meeting anyway.
Correct.
To get approved. And so really if we recommended approval to this tonight, it would kind of have to sit on the shelf because administratively, you wouldn't really be able to administer it, right?
No, you would.
Well, how so?
So really 11460 and 11473 are more clerical type, to make sure there's kind of a circular nation or a circular mention. So like when you're in 11460, there's a mention of 11414. And quite frankly, if there was actually a mention of this exemption in 11460, this probably would have been caught much earlier in the process. So they're separate parts of the code, but they need to communicate with each other that, hey, there's this exemption out here that we just granted, that Plan Commission may grant an exemption for this for an R4 property. So that's why we need to have those updates to the other parts of the code to make sure everything's kind of working in unison. But for the time being, there's no reason you couldn't move this forward and do those at a later date. It's up to the discretion of the Plan Commission, but it could be done. In my opinion, I don't think it impacts anything.
This text amendment means this would be a permitted use, not a conditional use.
Correct. In multifamily is already a permitted use in the R4 district.
Right,
so it's
right.
Not changing
But
that.
having multiple buildings would still be a permitted use with that odd half step of having to come to the Plan Commission. So
Correct.
it wouldn't be a conditional use, meaning there wouldn't be a public hearing.
That's correct. It wouldn't be a conditional use, but it's not necessarily permitted where the zoning administrator can just approve it. So there is oversight to the approval process.
Okay. But it would simply be for the commission's consideration without a public hearing.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioners, I'd like you to think on that one, right? Is this the kind of thing that we should be getting input from the public on when a proposal like this comes to the table? What I'm trying to get at is, like, again, I think this has merit, right? I mean, Jim's right. I mean, there's all sorts of multifamily projects out there, and they nearly always have more than one building, right? So to go through the full PUD process every time does seem like it might be a little more cumbersome than it needs to be. But I sort of feel like maybe this proposal is the pendulum too far the other way.
You're right. I think to your question about the public hearing part, I think that is important, especially when you have larger developments. It's always nice to have that opportunity to speak about them from the public's perspective. We don't know what they could be, so it's hard for us to imagine that. I think it's a nice process to have in place that the public can speak about those if there is some unusual proposal out there.
I guess I'm a little confused. I mean, that's not really what we're proposing. I mean, multifamily is a use that's already allowed under the R4. This strictly has to do with allowing more than one building on a lot. I mean, that's it. It doesn't have anything to do with the project in and of itself. The approval, the zoning, the use. It's just strictly that it's going to be more than one building on one lot.
But to me, that feels like a somewhat different use than a single building on a single lot. Now, granted, Jim, I know that instead of, for instance, on this proposal, instead of 5 buildings, you could say, well, forget it, I'm gonna build a 80-unit building, and there you got 1 building, right? I mean, I realize that there's sort of, I don't wanna call it a way around it, because that might not be desirable either, but if we don't have some mechanism like this, then that's an unintended consequence of not putting in a better process, right? But I don't know,
What would be the issue of having more than 1 building in a lot? I mean, like I said, with the project next to us with the mini storage, the city wanted to have all the buildings on 1 lot because it was cleaner. I guess I'm a little confused as to what the issue is.
there's probably no issue, but the point is that there's a process that it goes through to vet out whether there's an issue or not.
Well, right, this is, again, it's adding a process which is, I mean, it's still gonna be approved by the plan commission. It's just not done via a PUD. If it's zoned R4, well, then we have the right to go and ask the plan commission, okay, plan commission, are you guys okay having more than 1 building on a lot? I mean, because the same question's being asked in a PUD.
Then why do you not want to go with the PUD?
Because, as explained before, the PUD is a much more onerous and comprehensive submittal process. Going this route, I mean, it just begs the fundamental question right from the get-go is everyone okay having more than 1 buildings on a lot? If that's the case, then it's like that, it makes the process much more definitive in terms of the route we would need to go. Again, I think it's kind of a fundamental question right from the get-go, and fairly an easy yes or no answer, which is fundamentally, are you okay having more than 1 building on a lot? Again, I don't.
That is the only question, Jim. I think the question is, are we changing our ordinances to accommodate this?
Well, you're still basically, it's still under the plan commission approval.
It is. You know what? I don't know that I don't support multiple buildings, but I do know that I am hesitant to change the ordinances without fully understanding the impacts that it will have in the future and on other ordinances. I think that needs to be vetted more.
Who does that vetting?
City attorney usually.
Matt, did the city attorney already chime in on this? I believe you had mentioned that
Yeah.
earlier. What did he say?
Paul was the one that suggested that to have consistency with the other parts of the code, that updating 11460 and updating 11473 would need to be, or should be considered.
But do we have those drafts?
Do I have a draft? No.
Matt, did the city require a PUD for the storage units?
No, he had Steve. The process for the storage units was conditional use permit. So as part of the conditional use permit approval, I mean, they were reviewing the site plan that was presented by the applicant.
Why did that project have conditional use? What made the use
The
conditional?
zoning. So per zoning code, when you look at 11473, self-storage units or mini storage units, I think is how they're classified.
Okay, so the use
was a conditional use permit.
Okay.
So, you know, under this, once they rezoned this to R4, then it came into 11414, and how is the applicant going to address 11414? And this is what was proposed.
Can you give me an example of a commercial or other non-residential project that would have multiple principal structures on it that would not have to be a conditional use permit?
Off the top, no. Off the top of my head, that'd be hard. I mean, mini storage is a good example because they're going to have multiple buildings just by the nature of the way those are built. I'm just trying to think of other built environments, other built things in town. Another one is the Subway and the is it Fusion Fitness? That's 2 buildings on one lot. I'm not really sure how that came to be or how that was approved. I think that's been around for quite some time.
How about at home again?
The what?
At home again?
At home again?
Living facility?
Okay.
Okay.
Buildings on lot.
Yeah, was that a conditional use permit?
I think that was a conditional use
Okay.
permit because I think that was done. I think I've seen the file on that. I think that was done recently. But just thinking of recent projects, I mean, those are ones that are. I mean, obviously, there's all the other multifamily. There's Kestrel Ridge that is built with Kestrel Ridge Apartments down on River Road has 6 or 7 apartment buildings on one lot.
Was that PUD?
Not to the records I have. No, it's zoned R4.
Slumpus Properties on Fire Street has 3 buildings on a single lot.
Right.
How was that approved then?
Right, that's what I'm trying to get at, like, how did these other things, because I know there's other places in town that would be similar to this, right? How were those approved, and how would this particular proposal have made that easier, better, or conversely, not as robust a review? I'm trying to set my dial on, like, what the right formula is for this kind of thing. Yeah, how did the buildings down on River Road get approved if it wasn't a PUD?
I could go back in the records and look. I mean, those were built in the late 90s.
Right.
Okay. I have looked at our ordinance.
So maybe it was a different zoning code provision.
No, I have looked at the ordinance. There was a similar provision to 11414 in the ordinance at the time that was built.
Okay.
So,
So we've had this kind of thing before.
correct. And I'm not, yeah. But as I said, I mean, that was late 90s. That was over 20 years ago. So then the question is, how do we want to address this moving forward? And that's why this was, turned into what it was after our discussions with the applicant on, well, these are your options, and this is the one that they wanted to evaluate. So.
Well, I would feel more comfortable with this if it had a public hearing component, if the language was more clear about that it would be approving a site plan, right? Those 2 things in particular, I'm mostly satisfied with your answer about 11460 and 11473.
You do have the discretion to change this at this point.
No, I
I recommend
understand
changes to this. So,
Sorry, Jim, were you saying something?
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. You're right, but you're not, with this clause, we're not approving a site plan. I mean, site plan approval under the R4 zoning is done at the staff level.
Okay, but my question to Matt before about the phraseology in here, his interpretation is that when a proposal like this would come, we weren't just giving a thumbs up or thumbs down to X number of buildings on a lot. It was more specific than that.
Well, I mean, the way that the language reads here is that it's just, it allows us to ask Plan Commission to have more than one principal building on a lot.
Okay.
That's it.
So your interpretation is different than Matt's.
Well, I mean, yeah, the language basically is, so the language right now in the section 11414 basically says that no more than one principal building can be on any lot zoned for residential purposes except as permitted through an approved planned unit development district. So all we're looking to do is add, and also under R4 zoning, that more than one building can be approved by the plan commission.
Either way, either your way or Matt's way, the language isn't clear.
Whatsoever.
I think that's a real fine point there is, does this change allow multiple buildings without question, or does it allow the plan commission to approve them?
It allows the plan commission to approve them.
So there's an approval step then.
There's an approval step, just as there is now with the PUD. We just wanted to add the R4 zoning because it seems like it makes logical sense to have a zoning which allows for basically multiple buildings to just be all on one lot. It just makes, in our minds, logical sense. And so
So Matt, you agree that this is, there's still an approval process in this step? I think that's my concern, and probably others, is that this isn't just granting approval across the board, there's still an approval process in this step. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, and there's approval outside of staff, which I'd prefer too, because, you know, I do prefer when things are approved by plan commission and other entities, so.
But what does that approval look like?
was going to be was to hopefully get this amendment approved, and then our next step was going to be to come back to you guys and say, are you guys okay if we have more than one building on a lot? And if you say yes, then
I disagree, because I don't think that's what I think what plan commission should be reviewing isn't the question is, can we have more than one building on a lot? Plan commission should be reviewing what you're gonna build. And if you're just gonna come back with a crayon and a sheet of paper saying, well, you know, we're gonna put a building here, no, I think plan commission, if they're approving it, they should be approving what you intend to build.
well, then Matt, you're looking to change the whole zoning code, because under an R4 zoning, if there were another.
No, I'm not. Under 7815, you are still required to submit a site plan, and staff has to review it. So why wouldn't they be reviewing what staff is reviewing?
I don't think they do that now.
Well, they should be.
So here's the problem I'm hearing, right?
That's how the process goes.
I think this might be a good opportunity to maybe postpone this decision and have Attorney Johnson join us for a verbal interpretation next meeting.
Yeah,
I wouldn't disagree with Sarah, plus it might give a chance to clean up some language that Commissioner Monday is concerned about.
And I'd be happy to draft more specific language based on, like, I'm still hearing two different things. Like, for what I'm hearing from Jim is that his vision of what would be brought to plan commission would be, hey, are you okay with more than one building on a lot? Well, that's, you know, how much is a bag of groceries? How many more, right? Or is the proposal, we propose to put 3 buildings on this lot, but we're non-specific about where they go or what the position is, and we leave it to staff to review the plan after we've said yes or no to the 3 buildings or 4 buildings, sort of generically speaking. What Matt is sounding like he's more comfortable with is that the proposal comes to plan commission, there's a specified number of buildings on the plan, and they're already located in the spots that they would actually be built in. So the question is, which of those flavors do we want to see in the zoning code if we are going to have something like this at all?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So, on that point about how many buildings and where they're located, I mean, we're held to a lot of different standards when we design a site plan Like Jim mentioned before, and Matt was talking about, we have to have so many percentage of lot in impervious surface. Matt mentioned parking stalls. I mean, we're held to so many different codes for various reasons that you can't just willy-nilly make a site plan and just throw buildings all over. You just can't do it. It's too rigid, Uriah, you know that the request to put multiple buildings on a single site is just that. Those buildings still have to subscribe to multiple different codes. And not only municipal codes, sometimes GNR with wetlands, runoff. I mean, we're really held to a fine point by a lot of different jurisdictions. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that just saying that we could put 2 or more buildings on one site doesn't give us carte blanche to do whatever we want. It's still very rigid, and it's overseen by Jason Letha, it's overseen by a building inspector, it's overseen by staff. I mean, it's not just the Wild West. Whatever anybody would want to do, haven't been granted the ability to do it by the Plan Commission. So, I just want to make sure that, I mean, do you agree with me, Uriah?
I see your point about the real specific locationality, right? But do you see my point about, like, what's Plan Commission going to decide on? Where are we setting that bar, right? Is the applicant going to come and say, I'd like to put 3 buildings on this lot? Or is the ask simply, I'd like to put more than 1?
Well,
from a Plan Commission standpoint, that's a big difference in the question. Sorry, say that again.
If you have a 2-acre lot, you've got the ability to put a few more, but you're still subscribing to the codes that are available to you for those types of construction. You're limited.
But I still think that we need to have a sense of how many.
Okay.
Right, I mean, I've got background, and I could probably look at a lot and say, oh, you can fit X number of lots on, buildings on there, right? But even I couldn't get it right all the time, and there's commissioners here, and will be in the future, with varying degrees of 0 to lots of experience with site planning.
Right now, staff has that ability to review. Are you saying you want to remove that from staff's ability to review and approve, or you want an additional review and approval, or?
I'm saying that I think Plan Commission deserves to know how many buildings might go on a lot, and that is what they would review and approve or deny.
Not only Plan Commission, but Plan Commission is the opportunity for the public to view these plans. And that's why having as close to a final set of plans as possible, I think is relevant and pertinent to the public when they're reviewing these plans, because I mean, these are supposed to be done. I mean, these meetings are taped for a purpose, and it is to inform the public of what is going on. So
I can concede that if you bring in a site plan that shows 3 buildings on it in a certain location, and then for whatever reason, your wetland delineation or some other layout, you need a couple more parking spaces or whatever, then it changes slightly. I don't think it's reasonable to say, well, you had 3 buildings before, but they were in these positions, and now they're in a little different position, you have to come back. That's not what I'm asking.
well, yeah,
Right.
Part of our application, we have 2 concept plans. Now, it hasn't been gone over with a fine-tooth comb, like Matt said, to adhere to all the ordinances, but this is what we're desiring to do. This is what we want to build and develop. Are you looking for something more?
Uriah, to your point, like when you say you could look at a plot of land and reasonably guess that you could put 3 buildings on that site, that's exactly our point and Jim's point. When we came in and first looked at lot 7, we were hopeful that we you could get 5 buildings on that site. Once we start looking at the zoning, the variances that we have to adhere to, we realized we had to dial it back to 4 buildings to meet impervious surfaces and green space, parking stalls, and so on. So what we're asking to do is come in and say, would you allow, on a maximum 5 buildings on the site? And then we go back and fine tune these plans to bring forth staff, and ultimately we have to pare it down. I mean, we're confined by a lot of different codes that what we can do. But anybody's first guess at it before they go into the real development process, like you said, it could be a guess depending on how these things apply to the parcel land.
But do you see what I'm saying about the difference in the question? Maybe I should ask the commissioners this, right? Commissioners, would you be more inclined to allow for a zoning text that says all we get to say is, yes, you could have more than 1 building? Or would you prefer some specificity on the number?
Would that number depend on the lot size?
It would depend on the lot size, but they could bring that to the proposal, right? Right, the proposal that gets brought in is, we'd like to put up to 4 buildings on this lot, as opposed to, we'd like to put more than 1.
Right, but isn't the check and balance in the at the staff level with Jason, Lisa, and Matt, and the city attorney, and I just feel like we're, digging our heels in for something that there's already a check and balance for.
Yeah, I think the code's going to drive that. Multiple buildings, we're allowing multiple buildings to code, or whatever the requirements are that we're trying to meet. I don't, to do multiple buildings or 5 buildings on this lot, I mean, you're basically defining the code then, right? I think the code will drive that and what's allowed. We're just allowing the discussion of multiple buildings on a single lot.
Hey, Matt, I couldn't hear a word you said. Can you summarize what you just said?
No, Mike, no.
Summarizing what you said, the code will drive how many buildings are on it,
Yeah.
and it's superfluous to have the plan commission be informed of that prior.
Okay, thanks. Well, where are we at then? What do you guys want to do?
Well, I'm comfortable with having more than 1 building on 1 lot. I don't think that's a problem. It's constrained by some of the other setbacks and things. I'd rather have multiple buildings than 1 monster building, certainly. But I think I do agree with Sarah that if there's some question about this, either process or approval or language, I think I would like to have that clarified by the city attorney per this discussion.
That's fair. And do you want to make them wait a month though?
I don't really want to make a month, no. I know they've got timetables and it's a pain in the butt going through this. Is there another way to do that quicker?
Well, Paul will be at council. This still needs council approval. So Paul will review it at the COW potentially on December 21st, and at council on January, I believe it's the 4th.
Yeah. Is it 4?
Yeah,
Okay.
the first Tuesday in January. So.
And if you delay it a month on our end, then now you're looking at the council meeting in potentially February before you
Correct.
take action on it. I don't know, it's a fine line. Actually, I previously had not heard any good arguments, but, Uriah, made some good arguments finally, so I appreciate that, Uriah. But again, I still think we're trying to do more than what is needed. I just think that there's we already have the mechanism at the city staff level to prevent anything crazy happening, unless you guys don't trust the city to do the job properly. And I mean, that's what it's about to me. Which I have faith in the city to do what's right.
But
That's all I have.
Yeah, I don't think it's about trust to the city, it's
Yeah.
about making an educated decision.
Yeah, and thank you, Andy, for your faith in the staff here. But the one thing is from our perspective, as I said earlier, having that transparency where it's approved by a public body also is, I think, probably something that kind of gives some reassurance to staff, because people do make mistakes, and that having it approved by a public body is having what is being built approved by a public body, I think, is a good thing, rather than
That's gonna happen regardless of what we do here.
That's true,
Right.
but having staff make a recommendation saying this is what's going to be built, we're 100% comfortable with this, rather than having it be a conceptual, this is what we're going to do, now let's dig in and actually do all the work to figure out what we're actually going to build. That's where sometimes it's it's a chicken and egg thing. So, but I just wanted to share that. So that's all.
What are the provisions for this commission to meet again, say in 2 weeks for a special meeting? Are we able to do that if we could get a legal opinion?
Yeah, you can meet within two. With the holiday coming up and staff having other meetings, it's probably gonna be hard for me to find time. Maybe late next week we could do it, but I'll leave that up to the commission.
As long as you give 24 hours notice, so it could be
Correct.
Friday, it could be Tuesday, it could be Wednesday. I mean, it doesn't have to be, it's just whenever Paul has time to meet with other questions you have.
Does anybody else think that might be a good compromise at this point?
I think that's a good compromise. I'd be willing to meet for a short meeting just for that clarification and keep this moving on the calendar.
I'm okay with that as well. It's a good idea.
Well, who wants to try to formulate that into a motion?
How does December 16th work? Next Thursday.
Works for me.
How early can it be?
It's up to the commissioner. It could be.
I have something at 7.
I have another commission meeting at 6.
Okay, so 5?
I've worked.
I will check with Paul, but we'll put that as tentative for right now because I don't know Paul's availability. Obviously, Paul's going to be the one that we're requesting to be there, that needs to be there. So. Okay.
I still need a motion to formulate all
Can I
this.
ask you one other question? You're asking.
Yeah, Jim, yeah.
What are you guys actually looking for clarity on from Paul?
I think there's numerous things. Correct, Uriah? Part of it is the ordinance and how that affects other things. And then, Uriah, you had a separate question on the amount of buildings and approval of public hearings.
Frankly, that question was for you commissioners. That's got nothing to do with Paul.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you, Ryan.
The question about the number of buildings is for the commission to address and decide what they are comfortable with, right? The question for Paul was the language and the other parts of the ordinance, right? So I'm not convinced we need Paul, right?
Yeah, because the other language was really a staff, tying other provisions of the code. That didn't come from us. So if you guys are all right with staff working that out with Paul, I'm trying to understand the need to have Paul.
So our choices are approve this as it's written, recommend that council not approve this, make amendments to the text right here and now, work it out and vote on amended text, or table it with text amendments to be worked out in the interim.
Well, could you also approve it subject to staff working on those changes? Those text amendment changes?
Theoretically, we could. We can kind of vote on anything we want. I wouldn't be supportive of that because I'd sort of be like, well, I'm approving something I don't know what I'm approving, so.
Yeah, in this case, we don't know exactly the changes. We did know the changes, and we said they'd be made in the future. That's easy to approve, but I think we just want clarification on who has approval for this process. The reading from Matt to was not completely clear whether who had the approval process on this. I think that was my question. But I think the answer for you, Ryan, is I think table this until the next meeting.
I mean, the language reads, at the sole discretion of the plan commission. And that's the way the language reads.
I support tabling this until we have better answers and a clearer understanding.
I mean, I understand, Ms. Moore, what you're saying, but I guess I'm just trying to get clarity on what questions are out there that need to be answered.
I think by the fact that we can't answer that clearly means that we have questions we need to work through. And that further substantiates the fact that this should be tabled for a little bit until we can figure that out.
To figure out what the questions are? Or is that coming
Part
from
of it. No, that's part of it. And then to figure out exactly, what's not settling well, and does that fit in with the ordinances and the intents of everybody?
I mean, if we table this, I would be happy to write out text that I personally would be comfortable with so that if it gets tabled, it's not like we table it, wait till the next meeting, and then just start talking about it then again, right? We actually have something to talk about.
Are we tabling this until next Thursday at 5, or is it being tabled for the entire term of the next meeting?
So the 16th.
next Thursday? At 5?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything that we can provide to help with any unanswered questions in the next week?
Not for me, thank you.
Uriah, if you draft something, is it something that you can send to us so that we can take a look at it before next Thursday and or discuss with Paul if need be?
I'll send it via Matt. I'll send it to Matt, and Matt can distribute as appropriate.
Okay.
I'm still looking for a motion in the second.
I declare a motion to table this until December 16th, when we meet again at 5 p.m.
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those signify in favor by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That can be done via Zoom again, correct?
Yes.
All right, motion carried to table for a language adjustment. All right. Hey, item 9.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see everybody next week, and now wait to get something from you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Item 9. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you, commissioners.